This is Erica Griffin. On this episode, my husband Hayne and I talk about my run-in with breast cancer and how we've processed God and life throughout it all. Thanks for listening to A Woman's Body Month on Pastor with No Answers.
Liz and I, super close friends, go way back. Basically, I've helped raise her kids. She's helped raise ours. Ellen and I, we've been podcasting together for a long time, been friends and never met each other in the flesh. Pretty crazy. Hayne met you in the flesh a long time ago, but never really developed a friendship until we started hanging out online. And I've gotten to know Erica a little bit, not much. Ellen, you actually got to spend some time with the Griffins face to face because they did their whole sweep of the whole country. Was that a cool visit? Were any of y'all let down? Like, Ellen,
No.
Were you thinking, golly, I kind of thought Hayne was cooler on Zoom?
Well, he's taller. He's taller than I thought he would be.
Right.
Oh, really? You weren't expecting the height?
No,
Hayne,
no. It was such a fun little visit. No, we weren't even nice enough to let them sleep in our house. We made them sleep in our driveway. And then you changed my tire the next day, so it was like a huge win.
So, Liz, you are meeting Hayne and Erica for the first time, I'm imagining. Yeah. So we had to reschedule this, and the last time we were planning on doing this, it was very mixed emotions because you and I have become pretty good friends pretty quickly, and I know how, just from conversations with you, like I know how currently raw this is for you and Erica, and you guys are taking a swing at unpacking it on a podcast. You know what I'm saying? Like that. I think I told you, I'm like nervous for you guys because this is like, in my life context, I have never lost anyone from breast cancer. I hate saying this, but when I hear about breast cancer, I think, oh man, that's really bad. That's going to be a long road ahead. But it doesn't feel like devastating. It doesn't feel like, oh my gosh, this person could die, because that's just never been in my world. And yet I've seen this thing turn y'all's world upside down, like just completely upside down. I'll start here. What's your marriage like now as far as closeness compared to the day before you guys found out that Erica had this cancer?
I think that when Hayne and I looked at these questions and talked a little bit about before, the first thing I thought is, this isn't the first time we've gone through something scary. It is definitely the first time we went through something that felt like it could take a life. Several years ago, 10 years ago now?
Yeah, close.
Hayne was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and a couple months later broke his neck in a mountain biking accident. And we didn't think either of those things were going to end his life, but both altered. And the neck break could have paralyzed him. Yeah. Like that could have been massively life-altering and scary.
Surgeries, hospitalized for a while. Yeah.
Every time we encounter something like that, it brings you to a place of all of the nitpicky things that irritate you do not matter. That could irritate you about somebody, like your partner or your girlfriend or boyfriend or spouse or whatever. It's all out the window. Like, I don't care that the dishes aren't done or the kids got to school late or didn't get to bed on time or whatever it is. It doesn't matter anymore.
We say that suffering ruthlessly eliminates the unnecessary so that the necessary can speak.
Yeah.
And that's definitely been our experience.
Yeah. So when
did you guys come up with that, or did y'all read that? Did y'all come up with that? Because if so, y'all need to start writing books.
He probably does.
I probably borrowed the verbiage from different places, but that's
right.
Pretty much my thought.
Yeah. So when the cancer diagnosis came, I wouldn't say it brought us closer. It was almost like, we kind of know how to do this. Like, we know how to do crisis. We know how to do hard. We know how to do scary. This is a new level, but
I'm reading between the lines, but just saying it out loud, you guys have a good marriage.
Yeah.
You're in a good place.
Yeah.
Well, we've had
hard times.
We've had to work through stuff. We've had
counseling and those times in life where I'm saying something, he's saying something, and neither of us can hear the other person.
Right.
Like,
right.
Neither of us.
But when you're finding out about this, you guys are in a good place.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the news kept getting worse and worse.
Yeah.
That was the thing, is it was, you're positive for cancer. Well, what does that look like? How positive? We're positive, but how severe is it?
How bad?
Is this a routine breast examination? Do you give yourself an examination like, oh, I think I feel something, or how does that?
Okay, so that is a little bit a longer story, if that's okay. So
yes, because I want to know this part, because this would be helpful to me who does not know how to get myself breast exam.
No, good. That's good. Yeah. So in 2018, I found a lump, and it was small on my right side. It was small. It didn't hurt. I wasn't super, super concerned about it, because they say, around your cycle, you can get lumps. There's all kinds of reasons. The smart thing is to go get it checked out. So I did. I went to the doctor. She did an ultrasound and sent me for a mammogram. They did 2 ultrasounds and 1 mammogram, and they came back and said, it's just a swollen lymph node, nothing to worry about. But this was in 2018. So I was 39 at the time, and they said, you're almost 40. So we're going to have you do yearly mammograms, and we'll just keep an eye on it. And so that was what we did. We did yearly mammograms. All my mammograms came back normal. The lump grew, the lump shrunk. I went even in for my normal OBGYN exam, and she said, well, if it gets any bigger, the lymph node, because we're still talking, it's a lymph node, inflamed lymph node. She's like, we'll just take it out.
I don't understand why nobody that you saw thought like, well, let's do a biopsy of that.
Yes.
Why
Thank you,
that
Ellen.
happen?
And I didn't know to ask for that. I figured if they thought it was dangerous, they'd do a biopsy. But since all my mammograms were normal, nobody, including my doctors,
how can you have a normal mammogram with a breast lump?
Because a lymph node, if it was a lymph node, which is what I was told, it wouldn't pop up on a mammogram. It would just be cancer, because cancer has different signals. It sends different signals. So I went in for mammograms, and I went in for 3D, because they did tell me you have dense breast tissue. So Ellen, that's another reason they won't catch cancer, is if you have dense breast tissue.
Which is why of the female population have.
Hayne's really into dense.
Well, I was just going to say, most women do have that. I don't know that
Hayne's like 47.5% of white women and 39.
I'm just saying, a lot of folks saying, well, I don't have a dense breast. Well, one and 2 of you do.
Yeah.
Now, so I'm really not trying to be crass, but dense breast would just be like firm breast and not soft and squishy.
All that it actually means is the mammogram. And I didn't know this because nobody told me, but it means you either have fatty or you have dense. And if you have fatty, a mammogram is very clear. If you have dense,
I have fatty for sure.
it just can't see much.
Even though it's 2022 and we should be able to just see inside our body.
Yes. Yeah. And I was sent for the 3D because I do have dense breast tissue, and that still didn't pick it up. After the fact, after the diagnosis, I did some Googling, and it's like a dense breast tissue mammogram picks up cancer in 30% of the cases, but nobody tells you that. Some doctors tell you. My doctor didn't tell me. Like, I have a girlfriend who she doesn't do mammograms. She does ultrasound. But I just learned that because she's got dense breast tissue, and her doctor's like, mammograms don't work for you.
Okay, so we all need to go out and find out if we have dense
Find out. You need to find out. And I didn't know that,
Liz,
and I wasn't told that.
Me and you. What kind of boobs you got? Fatty or dense?
I already know.
Yeah, it's so...
I don't know yet. I just know that they have milk in there. Well, one.
Like, is this something like honestly, like a blood type for women? Like, y'all have to know?
You kind of do. You definitely do need to know.
Yeah, but
because
when you're young, you don't get taught that. You get taught that after the fact.
Hayne, for another show, I want to find out if there's like 2 different types of testes, like a firm or a squishy. But
you go
this
to
is
your
about
doctor
women's
and ask
body.
him to check you, and then let me know how that conversation goes.
Maybe that could be a whole episode, just you and your doctor.
Yeah. That would be good. But Ellen, to your point though, Ellen, what was not a lymph node, but everybody was telling me was a lymph node, was not gone in a year. My doctor should have ordered a biopsy, and she didn't. And that's one of the hardest parts of my story is that I didn't ask for it, but I didn't know to ask.
You didn't know
to
ask. Yeah.
But I mean, everybody's like, you have to advocate for yourself. You have to. And I was like, I didn't know that I was supposed to. And
so would this have gone down a lot differently if you had?
Yes.
Yes. Still would have had cancer.
But
totally.
not at the advanced stage where it metastasized.
Wow. Right. Where we're still trying to figure out what to do with some things right now.
And I know everybody makes mistakes, but is that still your doctor? And we can edit that if that's not a good question.
She is not my doctor anymore. She retired. Right. But I would have gotten a new doctor probably anyway.
Yeah.
We do now.
Well, I haven't met her yet, but yeah. Yes, I do have a
Lots
new
of
doctor.
doctors right now.
That was 2018. And in 2021, I was like, okay, this is just weird. And if it is still a lymph node, it needs to come out because that's what my doctor said. If it gets any bigger, we'll just take it out. And it got bigger again. So I went in, I pushed. Yeah. I was like, I want to come in and have you look at this. And this was in COVID, a year of COVID, and we had vaccines. And even the nurses pushed back on me like, oh, everyone's getting their vaccines and they're all getting lumps in their breast. Don't worry about it. And I was like, no.
What? Sorry, what?
I was like, no. This has been here since 2018. We need to look at it. And so I went in and they did an ultrasound. And that's when they finally said, you need a biopsy. That was in May of 21 and in June of 2021.
June 7th.
We got the news.
In the evening, we got a call and that was the call.
I know that this is not helpful, but this feels like malpractice to me.
Right. And
we're exploring that.
We've talked about
topic for another episode.
Right.
Yeah.
What's the verdict when you get off the phone? Is it, Hayne, are you like, I may lose you within 3 years or like, what's going on?
Like I don't know. That phone call came in, I couldn't breathe. And you probably can relate to this, Liz, but I got the phone call and I realized I was suffocating. Like I remember thinking, I need to voluntarily breathe right now. I'm going to pass out. It was just that devastating. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was just that raw. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think for me, my first thought was this lump's been here since 2018. This is scary.
Did you have an anger phase where you were just like pissed off more so than scared?
I go in and out all the time.
Yeah.
Still there.
I'm so pissed right now.
I'm pissed.
Trying to
I want to know who this person. I want my wife to like sue them for you.
Yeah. And yes, I think it was both fear of because I had the lump for so long, but and I love him to death. But my first thought was, I have an 11 and a 13-year-old. This is not okay.
Yeah.
I want, he's an adult. I don't want to leave him, but he's an adult and he'll be fine.
You could go find somebody else with breast tissue.
But I was like, I have an 11 and a 13-year-old. And I had seen 2 of my friends growing up lost their moms to cancer. That is not the life I want for them. It is so hard in those formative years.
Like, was there a percentage? Hey, this has got 40% chance of taking her life?
They didn't give us those kind of numbers, but they told us, they said, we believe that this is maybe later stage 2, and you can expect a really hard year of chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, and then you're going to be on the back end of it. But we need to be thorough. So we're going to do multiple scans, your chest cavity. We want to make sure, that it's not any more advanced than this. So scans happened. Mm-hmm. And then I vividly remember coming in the house. She was actually in this room that we're podcasting in, and she was bawling, talking on the phone. And I walked up and I'm like, what's going on? And she put the doctor on speaker and she said, it's metastasized. The tiger's out of the cage. It's moved to your spine. So you're stage 4.
Initially, they said, we see something on your spine and we see something on your liver. Mm-hmm. And so at that moment, I thought, well, it's everywhere. It's like taken over. And thankfully, that was not the case.
How long did you have that possibility in your head?
3 days.
3 days.
That's why we talk about it being in the belly of the whale.
It's our Jonah. If you get a diagnosis and you're not a doctor or a nurse, don't Google things because
I died a lot of times.
Exactly. Because the first thing I start doing is like, how long do I have? Do I need to start writing my kids letters for when they turn 16? I just wanted some information, but it was horrible because it was all like, oh, you're going to be dead in a couple of years. Like it was just all. And even when we first met my oncologist, when we first met her, she's like, your liver's fine. we're not so sure what's going on with your spine, but your liver's fine and da 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 da. And I was like, oh, so I'm going to like, I have a chance to like fight this and get better. And she's like, oh yeah. And I was like, well, I thought I might be dead in a couple years. And she goes, no. She's like, where'd you get that? And I was like, the internet. And she's like, don't Google things.
Oh, that was a good day. I bet that was a good day.
That was a really good day. But it was the 3 days in between getting that call and meeting our oncologist that we thought, oh, it's everywhere.
And when it's nice though, if you could have had that information given to you when Hayne was with you and with the oncologist there to give you that information, so you didn't have to have those 3 days where you were thinking that. Who wouldn't Google it?
Right.
Oh, right.
Like
they should know better.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, I've said that. I'm like, what the hell? They could have given us a little bit of extra on the back end.
Right.
It's metastasized.
Right.
I would be like, don't tell me anything from now on until I have like the oncologist and my husband with me. So that way we can like have an educated conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
But that was a rough 3 days. When you're talking about writing letters, we went into a little gift shop where you looked at journals.
Oh, yeah.
She's going to purchase 2 journals, one for each kid, and start writing stuff in it for the children.
Yeah.
I mean, it was that raw, scary.
So get us to present day.
So we got the diagnosis. We knew there was one metastasis on my spine and that there was lymphatic involvement, which just means cancer was in my lymph nodes. It was not a swollen lymph node. And so then there was some back and forth about treatment, because once it spreads, you can go a more palliative way of treatment, which is more medicine. And that's not to say that they weren't fighting for my life. That's to say breast cancer research has come so far that they now have medicine you can take as opposed to getting chemotherapy infusions that acts like a form of chemotherapy. It's not. Well, I mean, technically, is it? Technically?
Sort of.
But it's just a much more tame version. Like your hair doesn't fall out, because I'm on it right now and my hair's growing back, and your body doesn't take the hits.
The slam.
Yeah.
That chemo gives you.
But it's a very intense drug. So the debate was, we can't have you on this intense drug forever. So we're going to do the whole chemo deal. And then depending on how your body responds to that, we'll know how long to put you on these drugs.
And it's important to say too about doing the super aggressive. It was because she was so young and so healthy. They thought her body could take it. It was one of those conversations with doctors at Duke and then locally where we had 2 options, more palliative or like really hit it hard, like treat it like it was aggressive type 2 or unaggressive, like advanced type 2. Not type 2, goodness, stage 2.
Yeah, not diabetes.
Yeah, no, we're not in diabetes now. Stage 2.
It's about you, Hayne.
That's right. Just about me. Because she was so young and so healthy, she's a fitness instructor, they felt like that it was worth swinging for the fences with the hard chemo. If she would have been 65 or 70 years old, the chemo wouldn't have happened.
Right.
It would have just been, let's just do palliative. It would have been more potentially risky and fatal to do the hard chemo, than it would be to do the palliative at that age.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why they went that route.
And there's a chance, because they have had patients like me, and they did the hard chemo, and it's brutal. It's 5 months, and it's hard, and it didn't work. And so it's really hard when you're trying to decide to put a patient through that, and you do the 5 months of chemo, and the cancer doesn't respond. And so you basically hit restart with your treatment. And that wasn't the case for me. It worked. I did 5 months of chemotherapy, 3 different kinds of chemo. So I started in July. In December, we scanned, and there was no discernible cancer in those scans.
Amazing.
Yes. Amazing. Tumor's gone. They can see something on the spine, but it's not alive, meaning there's dead cells there, kind of a thing, but there's something there, but it's dead. But yeah, and we didn't realize until after the scans and we went back to the doctors, they were so excited.
The doctors were blown away.
They were like, you almost had a complete response. They were so excited. And part of me was like, well, yeah, I mean, isn't that what's supposed to happen? But apparently not. Like it doesn't always happen. So that's a really good prognosis, which meant because it worked, we stayed aggressive. So we had a bilateral mastectomy with reconstruction and radiation on the chest wall. And now we're still dealing with the one spot on my spine.
It doesn't have active cancer.
It's not active cancer. It's dead cells, but they're wondering about radiating that spot. And it's just very complicated. But in the new study came out that if you have 4 or less metastases, that the radiation to that particular metastase is not necessarily beneficial. Like it won't necessarily stop it from coming back in other areas. But it was one study of 140 women versus all the women who have cancer, breast cancer, and have one or
a bone metastasis.
And so it's not super conclusive, but it creates, again, like with the original diagnosis and not knowing exactly the form of treatment, it creates question marks. So we're kind of in that question mark phase of one of my oncologists is like, yes, you should do it. And one of them is like, 50. She's like, I could talk myself into either one.
How much conversing have y'all had in this span of time? Are you going to get remarried? Of course I'm not going to get remarried. I want you to get remarried because the kids need a mom and just blah, 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 blah. Like, have y'all had those sorts of conversations?
Yeah, we even had those conversations during that 3-day phase in the whale. And looking back on it, I think the reason why we had them, you're so raw, you're in so much pain, and you cannot stop thinking about it. It's just consuming you like you're drowning. And the only way for us to talk about it without just crying and wailing was to talk about it logistically. For some reason, talking about it logistically pulled some of the emotion out of it.
Yeah.
And
it probably made you feel like you had a small bit of control if you could make those choices at that time, because you can't control anything else.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And we've talked about some of that stuff since, but once we got into fighting it and got into the chemo, we don't talk about the logistical stuff as much.
Right.
And we're in such a good place prognosis wise now, but we were just laughing. My son today, we were talking about cancer and
I was at some doctor's
She was at some doctor's appointments. Yeah, I was at how things were going. And we just started unpacking a little bit. And he on his own just said, if you remarry, I'm going to be so pissed. I mean, just straight up. So, yeah. But anyhow.
Yeah.
Priscilla and Liz, they hung out all the time, especially in those early days. I mean, Priscilla spent the night at the hospital the first night. And so my oldest daughter, when she was 5, they're literally seeing a close family of ours lose a parent, so it was a really big deal. And Rosa was like, if something ever happens to Mom, I'm going to be really mad unless you were to marry Mrs. Liz. That was her thing. If you marry Miss Liz, I won't be mad.
I do remember her saying something about she couldn't understand why his shoes were still in the house when she came by that one day. And I think I just hadn't moved them, or she asked if they would still be there. I can't remember how it went, but I remember her asking about his shoes.
Yeah. I mean, she was so young. That was a long time ago.
It's the stuff. It's the stuff that is the hardest. All the stuff.
I was very much like, I want you to move on. I want you to be happy, but don't you dare marry someone who's going to be bad to our kids. Because like I said, my friends had lost their moms and their dads remarried almost immediately. And
really?
Their stepmoms were just
horrible.
Men can't hang on for very long. After my mom died, my dad was with someone 3 months later. I mean, he was older, and they've been together now for about 14 years. Yeah. They just got married this year, by the way. Now that they're in their 70s.
I was even like, if you have to be with someone, just hide it from them. Like, like just give them time. They are going to need time.
For sure.
Yeah.
And Hayne, what was your posture as far as like, I'm not marrying anybody else, or are you just like, I'm not talking about it, or what? Well,
that's kind of still my posture. To be honest,
I can't imagine you would be telling your wife like, "Oh, sure, I'll date again." Like that's not something that seems like a natural thing to do.
I think Priscilla and I would be able to talk about. I mean, I
wait in this scenario, Joey. In this scenario, which one of you is dying?
I know, but I think that makes it even more serious to delve into that.
I feel like you guys could both have that conversation, but I also think it's because you walked through that with me too, to where you're like, this could happen, and it was like so close to you that you guys, I think most of our friends in our church group were having those conversations. Like, what would you do?
deep down in your heart in those early years and the rawest years, were you legit convinced that you weren't going to be with anybody else? Like that was it?
120,000%.
Golly.
I was like, I will be the best single mom in the entire world. I'm going to kill it. I'm going to do great. And I have a million people that are helping me, and I got this. Like what Erica was saying, in my brain, whenever I started to have feelings like that again, my first and only real concern was, is this person going to be as good as Joshua to my kids? And I totally couldn't have picked somebody better than Alex, because she's just like a child. So she actually is like Joshua, but in a female form. So it's kind of interesting. We all joke about it.
And maybe a little more sophisticated. I mean, a little bit more. I think all of us in this conversation probably, I don't know, I'll throw a number out there, 7 years ago would have been like, oh my gosh, praise the Lord. That is so awesome. I don't think there's anything wrong if there was something in our heart that was thankful to God, but I don't think any of us connected it to God did this single-handedly to Erica specifically. And the reason why we can't do that anymore, and I hope I'm not speaking for anybody else, please speak up if you're not jiving with me, is because we know of the hundreds of people in our lives who have had the same prayers and died. I can't say praise God specifically because I just don't know how that stuff works. Now, I'm thankful to a good God that he's with you. Yeah. But I am curious, how would this play out in your faith a dozen years ago or however many years ago when you guys were in that sort of thought process and belief system that we're all so accustomed to? And are you thankful that you're in a different place in your faith going through this instead of that real cookie cutter? So, would your prayers be differently 10 years ago? Like, would you be praying, God, please heal, heal, heal? What's kind of your posture now as opposed to that?
I do track exactly with what you're saying, Joey. It's like that was totally how I thought 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And I carry a lot of that now, even though I don't believe that. And so there was a lot of, please God, take this. And there was also a lot of, God, are you mad at me? Did I do something to make you give me cancer? And I know you didn't give me cancer. You don't give people, like I would do this double talk in my head, like because of my upbringing, like because I believed God's sovereign over everything, that had to mean that he allowed cancer or gave me cancer. And so even though I don't believe that way anymore, that God gives bad things to people. And I don't know that I ever really believed that, but I sort of did because I still struggle with the idea that I was being punished. Yeah. Like I had a lesson to learn.
It's that thought that he allowed it to happen.
The allowing is just as hard as the giving. Like, like that's just as hard. And I would never say that to somebody else. But I have to admit how much I had to face down those same thoughts of that I don't even agree with anymore, that God gave this to me and God can take it away. And that has been an interesting part of the journey.
It's still part of the journey.
Yes.
If we're honest.
Because I definitely did pray, Lord, if possible, I would like to be healed. And I'm going to do everything in the medical world to be healed.
Man, I know I have such a hard time praying for stuff like this because I know that it is what it is and God didn't give you cancer. And
right.
If you start thinking like, God, why aren't you taking this away? Then you have to look at the people that have cancer. Like, why isn't he taking their cancer away? And just the semantics and the compulsive part of it is like so overwhelming to me. And that's part of my like deconstructing my gross old church faith. It's the superstitious prayers that make me spiral a little bit. And when I've had friends that have gotten cancer, some have died, some have not. And if I was to just explore that, that's very confusing. And there's no answers. So I am hoping, because both of my parents have gotten cancer, I'm hoping that if and when, I'm kind of preparing for when, it happens to me, that I am not in this cycle of superstitious prayer and agony, like with no questions, when I can really just, I'm hoping that I can just look at science and like, well, some cells mutate this way, some don't. And, my friend got the other cells. That sounds easy to me to say now, but I'm really hoping that will be my thought process.
It's been a battle and a struggle, because I think the things that we're given when we're young, or the things that we're indoctrinated with first, they just, and particularly for a long period of time, they just stick with you. In my line of work, whenever we train young guys, we want to train them right from the very beginning, because those foundational blocks are so important, because when the shit hits the fan, they're going to act out in the way they were originally trained. They were first trained. Yeah. They will act out in that way. For the longest time in our department, they would never hire young recruits that had ever worked for a different department, because they didn't know what they were indoctrinated with, that they'd have to break, and it might not get broken, because when we're in a panic mode and you're in survival mode, you're just going to literally act the most basic raw way, which is usually how you were first taught.
Is there any hope to get untaught, untrained?
I think you got to go through these things. You got to go through these crucibles, and you got to walk through them. This would have been 12 years ago. I would have totally thought, well, God brought this to us, and there's some big lesson to be learned here. And I've come to the place now in my life, with the suffering that I've been through personally, my own body, and then with hers, having that idea that everything happens for a reason, and God did this to teach me something. That's just the opposite side of the prosperity gospel coin.
Don't forget, God won't give you anything you can't handle.
Yeah, all that BS. Yeah. So prosperity gospel essentially teaches, if you do the right thing, then God's going to bless you, and riches and health, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're that special. The other side is, if everything happens for a reason, then I'm so special that even my sufferings are going to be ultimately for my wealth and benefit, to make me a better person. And that's baloney. I believe that when they happen, that there's the opportunity to grow and learn from them. But we all know people that have suffered well, and people that have suffered horribly.
Yeah. I've thrown in the towel completely with, I don't even know if I care to figure it out. It's just so beyond, as far as how all this stuff works.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, as you were saying, one of y'all was talking about how God allowing is just as good as him doing. I mean, think about a little girl that grows up. She's 17 years old. She's been disfigured her whole life. And her mom has told her whole life, it was boiling water. It was an accident. But then she finds out as a 17-year-old that her mom basically just watched her, and could have stopped it. That would be a complete game changer. There's no way that girl could not put that directly on her mom. And none of us would argue with her if she did, because her mom sat there and let it happen. So it's just like, we throw around this theology to make sense out of things that just aren't supposed to make sense.
Right.
Like, well, I mean, God just allowed that. Well, it's a mystery. It's like, oh my
Well, but
gosh,
also the people who aren't Christians, who get healed from cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Did they do that because God saved them from cancer?
Or they had some kick-ass oncologist and good medicine.
That's more like.
And I've really dealt with that allowing, and I don't have any definitive answers, but I think for love to exist, there has to be possibility. If there's not possibility, then it's not really love. It's just coercion and manipulation. So for love to truly be love, there has to be the possibility of loss. There has to be the possibility of deep connection, togetherness, but there also has to be the possibility of brokenness. That's what makes love love. That's what makes it so special.
See what you're saying. So you can't really care about something if you would be neutral to it if it left.
Like between she and I, the fact that there's a possibility that she could leave me, or that I could leave her, because that possibility exists, it makes the love between us richer. It makes
I should go tell my husband that. I should go remind him that we could die tomorrow.
But if that possibility,
it's the new marriage couple devotions. Every day is about death. Every day is a different way how you could possibly die.
Yeah.
Right.
How much of an attack would this be on your womanhood when it comes to this feminine part of your body? Because obviously I want to hear what Erica has to say, because she's the one who's actually living this. But sounds very violent, like to your body, Erica. I hate saying it that way, but I think that's just, it just sounds like it's
it is. Yeah.
It's just so brutal to you. So I can't get that word out of my head, like brutal and violent. But then I'm just curious, like Liz and Ellen, would you guys think that it would also jeopardize how Erica processes womanhood? I mean, I don't know. That could be a preposterous question. Breasts are a very feminine thing.
That would only be natural, but I don't think we could ever answer that unless those things were actually happening to us. For me, I would probably think, oh, they're breasts. But if I had something that was literally killing me from the inside because of that, and that had a possibility of having to be removed and all of the trauma that goes with that, there's no way that I could imagine that not feeling the way that you just described. I can't imagine that. I mean, I don't even have a big chest. So for me, coming from somebody
but you got that dense tissue
is small chested, they're not a big deal to me. But I have friends who have breast cancer I've listened to them and all the things that they say, and it's very educating to me to hear what they have to say and how that does affect how they feel about just being a woman. And that I have spoken to people who have breast cancer who have enlightened me and things that I had no clue about, that I wouldn't have ever even thought about until they told me, because they actually walked through it. So
I think that there's such strength in women who go through this. So for me, it feels like another cross to bear for women. And the women that I know that have dealt with breast cancer are more powerful than the ones who haven't gone through that. And to me, it makes them more womanly. You know what I mean? Like, whether you get your breast tissue removed or you don't have nipples or whatever, to me, there's even more power in being a woman if you're dealing with cancer that attacks you specifically from being a woman. Now, I know that men can have breast cancer, but I am saying, obviously, it's more common for women.
Well, and also if you breastfed your children, I think there's that aspect that you have to think about too. This is something that I fed my children with. This is
right. That's what I'm thinking now, because I'm still breastfeeding you a little bit, and it's just like, these are, to me, they're tools. You know what I mean? And maybe today's not a great day to talk about it, because I would be happy to lose them. I don't feel like they make me very, I would love them both to be smaller, but one would need to get a whole lot smaller to catch up with the other.
And we all just found out something new about Ellen.
Listen, breastfeeding is rough, you guys.
I ask it in a very sincere, genuine way. Like, does this affect how you think through womanhood? I mean, they're your breasts, for crying out loud. That's a very feminine part of your body.
Yeah. So I think it has changed even over the course of treatment, because at first I was like, I don't care. Just take him. Whatever you got to do. Like, let's just take care of it. And I just want to be cancer free and moving on with life. As things progressed and we did the bilateral mastectomy with reconstruction. So I did the reconstruction and one side got infected. And so they had to take out what they call a tissue expander. They had to take it out. And so I have been, for the last 3 months, I have one boob and one basically it's like an indentation.
It's like an indentation.
Like a capsule.
Yes. These last 3 months have given me a real taste of what it would be like to not have any breasts at all. Even though I still have one, technically, it still feels very weird. And it is real demoralizing. Like, you just feel stupidly like a part of you is missing. And I didn't have big boobs either. I had very small boobs. But it is so attached to, like, I nursed both my kids for a year each, and it's attached to being a woman, and it's attached to sexual desire, even pleasure.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to make it rated R, but it was for me. And so to have that taken away, and some of it I won't get back, even if we do reconstruct, and some of it I will. in terms of appearance, if that makes any sense. But I will never have any feeling there ever again. And that's really a hard thing to let go of.
It's a death.
Yeah. But at first I was like, who cares? It's not a big deal. They're just boobs. Who cares? I don't even like boobs, like over the course of things, you're like, oh yeah, it's a loss. It's a loss for sure.
Well, but don't you feel like it's like any identifiers, like your hair when you lost your hair?
Yes.
Wasn't it sort of the same thing?
I thought the hair was going to be harder. The nice thing about the hair is it is growing back.
The boobs don't grow back.
The boobs don't grow back. No.
Yeah.
And even getting into the chemically induced menopause.
Yeah.
And that changes things.
It does.
That's the big part for me. It's like, I would imagine that I could get over the boobs, but the hormonal influx of crazy might be the hardest.
Yeah. I saw my oncologist today and I was just kind of talking to her about just some of the side effects of menopause. And she was kind of talking me through, like, we basically dumped you into it, menopause. Because we chemically did it. And most women go through it, but they have years to adjust. Mm-hmm. And you are having to adjust in weeks and months. I just keep telling myself, this is something you'd go through anyway. And it's true. This is something I'd go through anyway, but it's just heightened. It's just a little bit faster, a little bit more intense.
A lot more faster. That's how we say it in North Carolina.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is just another both physical, emotional, mental adjustment.
We hear people say this all the time. I think in the right context is very true, very helpful advice. But we hear people say all the time, life is just not fair. And how do y'all hear that phrase now?
Liz, I want to know how you think about that.
Yeah, I think it's brutal.
It's a brutal truth.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And just to kind of piggyback off what y'all were talking about earlier, you have like family members that are still in that stage where they're saying like, oh, I'm going to pray about this and God's going to heal it. And if anything good happens, they immediately say, that's because I prayed about it. God answered my prayer. And I'm like, so then did he not answer my prayers? Like, does he not care about me, but he cared about you? Or when they pray about things that are so trivial to me, like, oh, I hope that I get this, or I hope I can have that. And I'm like, there are people that are sitting next to their kids' beds downtown at MUSC wanting their kids to live another day, and you're praying about something stupid. And I would just get enraged at some of the things that people would either pray about or things that they would say, I prayed about it.
They'd call the church office and want to schedule an appointment with me, and you would almost get them to hang up. No, she was very professional. I'm kidding around, but if she had it her way, she'd be like, you want to spend time with him to talk about that? Click.
Yeah, yeah, it does. But I think until something tragic happens to people, I feel like the people that are able to say those things easily, they haven't also had trauma, because I don't know anybody that has had trauma that has also still been that hasn't been tainted and has still been able to say, I'm going to pray about this and God's going to answer it. Like, right. I don't know anybody that's not had their mindset changed in that way.
Yeah.
Was there ever a time, Liz, when you just caught yourself and you're like, okay, I am way too focused on just how unfair life is. I'm angry a lot. I'm constantly thinking how unfair this is. I have to move beyond these thoughts for my kids, or
kind of. I didn't have time to think about whether things were fair or not, and I didn't think about it in regards to myself. I thought about it in regards to Hannah and George, because all I could think about was all the other people who were in my shitty position in some way, shape, or form. And it was, life is just unfair to so many people. Yeah. It wasn't just like Liz's world. It was me being frustrated and angry and short-tempered with people who felt like life wasn't fair, that didn't have any kind of tragedy, and with those people that would act like they just had it rough. I still don't have as much patience as I probably should.
Well, it's interesting, Liz, to hear you say that, because when the unfair thought would even come to my brain, or people would ask me, or they'd even say, Erica, this is so unfair. And I would say, it's unfair for every person who gets cancer.
Yeah.
Every single one. And I so identified with every person that was ever identified that ever got diagnosed with cancer that it was like easy for me to go, it sucks, but it's unfair for every single one.
Yeah.
So
I definitely agree. It is unfair. But if I have to be honest, as a white male, I've capitalized on unfairness.
Yeah.
And that's been something I've really chewed on recently, is that, life isn't fair. And we get, cancer does not distinguish between the healthy and the unhealthy often. It's just attacks. And, losing Joshua, I mean, you can sit and think, if he was in a car crash, is that right, Liz?
Mm-hmm.
If he would have called a red light 2 minutes earlier or stopped at a stop sign, or, there's so many things we can play out. It just doesn't distinguish. Tragedy just often happens.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel like I had like a why me mentality. I had just a oh shit mentality.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I wish that he had done this differently, or if he had done that differently. I think I was too traumatized to be thinking like, what if he had, I get what you're saying though. Like if, he had waited one more minute, or if he had done this or done that. I think I very quickly knew that was not going to get me anywhere, because it was what it was. And I didn't feel like that was something God allowed to happen. I didn't feel like that was something God wanted to happen. And I didn't feel like that was something God felt like I should go through to be like a voice to people. I just felt like that's really shitty. But I also was able to see all of the really cool things that happened, that I do feel like God allowed for me to have peace. I mean, like that morning, he said what kind of funeral he wanted on the way to church. I don't feel that sense of like, why did God allow that to happen? What was the purpose in that? I can see where he did work in certain ways to try, I felt, to give me some kind of peace in so many different areas. Something as simple as us having to go to one car. So for the last 6 months, we were communicating more because we had to drive one car everywhere.
With the faith changes, do y'all still have like a childlike faith in a happily ever after, forever and ever? Like when you're navigating through processing, Hayne, holy shit, I may lose Erica, and Erica, you're processing, I don't know what it looks like, but I know I'm not going to have Hayne, and I don't know. Do y'all have a childlike faith of, but heaven?
Some days. There's some days that it's just easier for me to be an atheist. When I get in those places where I'm resorting back to those initial ways I was taught of causality, that there's a causality to everything. And I just can't bear it in those days. And I'm like, it's just easier for me to be an atheist today. It's just easier not to believe. And it's really helpful. And then there's days where I have great hope, and it's usually the days that I'm more resourced, like I've slept well and I'm having a good belly full of food.
Is the atheist mindset, like you said, sometimes it's just helpful to resort to that? It would not be helpful in this specific situation, because that would mean goodbye is goodbye.
It means goodbye is goodbye. But then if you start spooling in your brain around, well, is there causality to this? You can get to some really angry, dark places in your head with the universe. When I broke my neck and I was dealing with my faith at that time, trying to figure out the causality of it, I reached a place I'm like, if this is how you operate, God, then fuck you. I don't want to have anything to do with you. Like, you suck. You suck.
Yeah.
There's nothing loving in this. So I don't want to follow you at all. That's where I got to. And I don't believe that. But those days where you're exhausted, those days where you're emotionally tapped out, it is easier for me to say, get into an atheist space, because it just allows me the freedom to say shit happens and it's okay.
If you feel like, well, things just happen, I feel like there's more comfort and security in that than wondering, why is this figure that I thought was going to protect me my whole life not doing it?
Right.
So probably a sense of control, and then that sense of security where there's no reason why it necessarily happened except for the real reasons, not anything spiritual or supernatural. It hurts to think anything other than it is what it is. It happened because of this. Very simple science, very simple. You looked the wrong way. You hit somebody. And then you kind of can take that feeling of somebody that it's been indoctrinated into you, that they love you and they're going to take care of you, like that they let you down. So then I don't have to feel like he's let me down if I think to myself more like logistically and less use that prayer and that knowledge of like God's with you and he's going to help you get through it, but he's not holding you like a puppet.
Right.
An honest look even at scripture, I feel like we are promised that God is with us. Yeah. And that's the only promise that I bank on. That's it.
Yep.
That's it. So, do I really just believe that a God is not even looking out for me and not paying attention and not invested in who I am? I know I totally believe in a personal God, but I give no rhyme or reason to anything that really happens to me. I give rhyme or reason to God being with me and what that looks like in the mix of the stuff that I'm going through. Like someone please try to make sense out of me, first of all, making the decision to get off my medication, but then almost killing myself and leaving my family behind and actually thinking that was the only possible move that I could make. Like, how am I supposed to spiritualize that? Like God allowed that to happen. God taught me a lesson. I mean, it's just like, I don't know. And I don't care to figure it out either.
More you just made a boneheaded decision to get off your meds.
Right. And almost paid the price. Right.
Yeah.
Did you allow your mind to think on the other side of things and what that could possibly look like? And was it hopeful?
That's a struggle for me. I think that I want to believe that death doesn't have the final word for everybody. Like Liz, your husband, for everybody who dies of cancer, whoever, it doesn't matter. But does that look like Hayne and I are married? And I think one of the reasons I really want to believe that is because I want my kids to know. I want to know my kids are fine in the afterlife. I want to know my family's fine in the afterlife. I want to know he's fine. I don't have some romantic idea that we'll all be in relationship and resurrected in heaven, but I hope that it's true.
Yeah. You just don't know what it looks like.
But I have no idea what it looks like. Yeah.
And anyone who thinks they know is bullshitting.
Yeah,
I don't think I know, but I do have a very childlike hope that all things will be redeemed. And whatever that looks like, I don't think my mind can grasp. But I think I'm camped out there. And for me, that's what I'm holding on to. That's my hope. And even if it's not true, like if I really do take a dirt nap, I don't think it costs me much in this lifetime to actually anticipate something better.
Sure.
Right.
It's not like I'm going to pay the price for, having optimism, but I do believe in this historical Jesus figure who rose from the dead, claimed to be God and said he's going to make all things new. And I'm banking on that. And like I said, if it doesn't happen, I think I'll just be dead.
Yeah.
And you won't know the difference.
That's what he was telling me. Because I'm like, I think it's true. I hope it's true. Because I do think that was the whole point of the resurrection, is to say, this isn't the end of the the death is not the end of the story. We've got so many
good times ahead. Oh my gosh. I really do. I really do think that.
Me too. And if I'm wrong, I won't know.
You won't know. Yeah. So it's a win-win.
Fuck Hayne and all your atheistic bullshit, man.
That's right.
It's funny, if you find a gay affirming church around in Charleston, all they want to talk about is saving the planet. It's like, we care about the planet, but it's like, talk about Jesus some too, right?
Ew, panties.
She hates that word. I know Ellen well enough to know that she hates that word.
The second he heard you say panties, he's like, uh-oh.
Oh, yeah, Priscilla's the same. Priscilla doesn't like panties. And she hates the word moist even more. So if you put moist panties together, she about loses her damn mind.
The edge of the pool for like most of the afternoon. Well, that night when they gave him a bath, he's like 6, and they're giving him a bath. He was just screaming because his penis was raw, because he put it in a pool jet and was on the side of the pool for hours just enjoying the sensations. Isn't that the best?
Dude, I mean, do you remember that, right? That was.
Oh yeah, I remember finding
one.
one.
That was one of the first times I was like, wait a second, that feels good. What is that about?
That's right.
You know, as a little 4-year-old, it's like I don't know what I'm thinking. I just know something felt right.
Yeah. It's like getting a back rub from mom.
Oh gosh, it is not the same thing. Ew.